Hi, folks. Welcome. I see some are still connecting to audio. Hi, Michael. Good to see you. I encourage people to maybe just put into the chat who you are and where you're zooming in from. And I'm delighted to welcome you all back, for many of you, to the second session of a three-part learning with Rabbi Chaim Seidler-Feller. Thank you so much, Rabbi Chaim, for joining IKAR and for teaching us these over the course of these 3 weeks. Last week we learned with Rabbi Chaim really fascinating shiur on this moment on the college campuses. But as I said to Chaim afterwards, what I so appreciated was that it wasn't just an analysis of this moment from the perspective of this moment. It was an analysis of this moment from a 10,000-foot view, thinking historically about how we got here with a critical eye towards ourselves and the responsibility that we hold for how we've arrived in this moment, and of course, where to go from here. And so it's with great excitement that I welcome you back, Rabbi Seidler-Feller, for our second session entitled "This Land is Your Land, This Land is My Land," on the value of the land of Israel and Jewish and Zionist thought. Welcome.
Thank you. Let's give people a few more seconds to get in. I was going to begin by reading a passage from the Israeli Declaration of Independence, but I would simply recommend to all of you just go online. First of all, it should be studied, and second of all, I think what we should always be mindful of is the aspirational dimension of the document. Because it does talk about living according to the principles of the Hebrew prophets and the United Nations Charter and the justice and reaching out to all its citizens, irrespective of ethnic or religious background. And I think we have to be reminded once in a while about what the goals and of the establishment of the State of Israel were, and reflect on how we are, or the people that, well, how we all are pursuing the fulfillment of those ideals. I think that it's incumbent upon us to do that. I also wanted to mention that a few years ago, they I don't know if can you see this? They published a big volume on, in Hebrew it says Megillat HaAtzmaut, the Declaration of Independence, and it's done. It says Megillat HaAtzmaut in Talmud Yerushalmi, with the Palestinian Talmud. So the Megillah is here, appears with small sections and commentary on each section, including complete articles by various scholars and thinkers, poetry, and it's viewed as a historical, as a cultural, even as I would say, as a religious document. So certainly, it's a foundational document. And if we want to really understand what the state of Israel was, what it means, I think that's critical. That's one of the issues that we're going to take up today. That's going to emerge in this discussion of the significance of the land. Why is Eretz Israel important? Can we survive without it? Can we be a people without the land of Israel? I mean, I know it's not a question that we want to ask. It's not a question that people want to hear. But I think in order to understand sometimes the significance of something, we have to ask ourselves, what would we be without it? I mean, again, I'm not sure that we're going to get to that today, but that's a question that you should think about. One thing we should know when we start, and you'll see it in a moment, there's only one time in the entire Bible where the land of Israel is referred to as Admat Kodesh, as Holy Land. I think it's more of this notion of Holy Land emerges more in Christianity than it does in Judaism. Although there is a degree of sanctity, we're going to talk about that. What that sanctity is, and the subject of our discussion this evening is our relationship to the land. And we're going to take up two meta-narratives that are presented by two significant medieval scholars, Maimonides and Nachmanides. And they basically frame for us two outlooks on the significance of the land with consequences for contemporary politics, for our understanding of Zionism, and in a way, for our understanding of the Jewish enterprise. I think it's really critical. I thought that I might start. I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna try to share my screen. Yes, I thought I would start with this image that I started using some years ago here. This is, I think, I mean, we used to smile about this. I hope we can continue to smile about the fact that this defines our relationship to Israel. It's pretty prickly. But we hug it. I mean, that's I think, perhaps if we can hold on to this. My fear is that people are so alienated that they don't want they don't want to be heard any longer, or they don't want to think about it any longer. But this was something that I always felt in many ways illustrates our relationship to Israel. So now let's begin to learn. I have to stop this and come back 1 second and come back here. No, that's not what I have to do. 1 second. Here. Yeah. Okay. Here. Okay. Can everybody see? Yes, you can see. And follow with your texts. Give me a moment.
And Chaim, sorry to interject, just to say I put into the chat link to the sources that Chaim is teaching right now. So if it's easier for anyone to have that open on a different tab than the Zoom screen.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll read. Please feel free. I just want to ask you. Please feel free. If you have a question, raise your hand. Let us know, and I'll take questions. Depending on the nature of the questions, in the middle of the presentation, not only at the end. And I'll try to sum up along the way as we move through the various sections of the teaching today. So I wanted to start with a biblical promise. You're familiar with the fact that the land is promised as the foundational dimension of the family as Abraham's family is beginning to grow and develop, and each one of the patriarchs receives the promise of the land. And we have a very famous Rashi commentary on the first verse of the Torah that is quoted very often as that which sort of grants us title or absolute title to the land. I want to discuss it, and we'll see what its implications are. So Rashi says as follows. Those of you who don't know Rashi, Rabbi Solomon ben Isaac, Rabbi Solomon Itzhaki, is a French scholar, 10th, 11th, or I'm sorry, 11th into the 12th century. He lived during the Crusades and wrote a broad and almost complete commentary on both the entire Bible and the entire Talmud. The three letters of Rashi's Hebrew abbreviated name, Resh, Shin, Yud, are often used to suggest Rabban Shel Yisrael, the Rabbi of Israel. No yeshiva student would begin his or her study of the Torah without Rashi. When we were in the 3rd grade, we were given Rashi, and that's how you learned. So Rashi says as follows. First Rashi in the Torah. Rabbi Isaac said in the beginning, Rabbi Isaac said, we're not sure who Rabbi Isaac is. Some say it's Rashi's father. Some say it's some midrash. We don't really know the origin of this. Rabbi Isaac said, the Torah, which is the law book of Israel, should have commenced with the verse, "This month shall be unto you the first of the months," which is the first commandment given to Israel. What is the reason then that it commences with the account of the creation? So this is a very famous question. What is Rashi asking? Anybody have a sort of an abstraction of Rashi's question? What to suggest? What's Rashi bothered by? Of course, the Torah should begin with creation. I mean, what do we ask? What's the problem? What does he think the Torah should be? Whose book is it? Yes, Michael.
More specific to Jews.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Jewish book, right? It should start with Judaism, not with creation. Judaism is law, is Torah, right? Halacha. The first law is HaChodesh HaZerachem. This is the Yom month. In other words, we left Egypt, and we were free. God gave us a watch and said, "Now you're bar mitzvah," right? You have to take. In other words, you have to take responsibility. Time is yours to manage. That's. I mean, it's and you determine a calendar. Fascinating. The transition in Exodus. So Rashi says that's the foundation. That's how the people become a people. It's not only narrowly the first halacha, but it's the formation of the Jewish people as they emerge from Egypt and they begin to develop their own rhythm and their own style and their own life. So how come the Torah starts with creation? By the way, very interesting that the Torah starts with creation, because the New Testament starts with Jesus, and the Quran is not a chronological book, but also it centers around Muhammad, and I value so much that our Torah made sure to link us to humanity. I think sometimes we forget that, and we think in narrow terms. But most scholars, by the way, hold that the first 11 chapters of the Torah were among the last, if you accept the idea of documentary hypothesis and a developing text of the Torah, that they were among the last chapters, or maybe the last chapters added on. So someone understood theologically that it's important to frame Judaism or the Torah in universal terms, even though the substance of the Torah has to do with Israel, but to allow us to understand who we are amidst humanity. But Rashi is pushing for a narrower view. Why does the Torah start with creation? So the answer is, you know the answer, because of the thoughts expressed in the text in Tehillim and Psalms. God declared to God's people the strength of God's works. God gave an account of the work of creation, right? He described creation. Why? In order that God might give them the heritage of the nations. That's the verse in Tehillim. In Hebrew, Korach ma'asav higid la'amo latet lahem nachalat goyim. What does that mean? For should the peoples of the world say to Israel, "You are robbers, because you took by force the lands of the 7 nations of Canaan," Israel may reply to them, "All the earth belongs to the God. God created the world. Blessed be God. God created it and gave it to whom God pleased. When God willed, God gave it to them. And when God willed, God took it from them and gave it to us." So our title is linked to the creation of the world in many ways. I mean, what Rashi is actually saying is that the creation of the world incorporated into the very act of creation is the Israelite Jewish people's right and claim to the land, because it was built into creation itself. That because God is the creator of all, God decides who gets it. God said, "You had it, you lost it, now Israel has it." Now, what does that mean? So most people have interpreted this Rashi to mean that Rashi holds that we have an absolute right and title to the land because it's God granted, and nobody can contest that. Now, I hope you understand that this doesn't mean that the claim is a legitimate claim, in front of the United Nations, that what we should do at the UN is come with a Tanakh, or with Rashi, with a Tanakh, right, with all the verses and with Rashi, and teach the people that they should know the truth. The truth is God promised it to us. Look at what Rashi says. Right? But the question is this really, I've had this question for a number of years. Because I learned the Rashi the way I presented it just now. It's always presented this way, and I think one should question in general, without my next move, a certain flimsiness to this assertion. I mean, it's an agaric assertion about the fact that God promised it us. God is the creator, and it's Rashi's opinion. In effect, what Rashi is saying is that the following. Rashi's question was, this is the Torah. The Torah should be Jewish. If the Torah were Jewish, it would start with the first law when we left Egypt. How come it starts with creation? So Rashi's answer is, don't worry. The Torah is Jewish because creation was described in service of Jewish, right? The creation is described only for one reason, to grant us the right and the claim of the land of Israel. Otherwise, there would be no reason for the Torah to begin with creation. That's a terrible answer. I thought that we start with creation because we're concerned with creation. And we marvel at creation, not because it's Jewish. There is, when we went to yeshiva, we sort of thought that all of history centers around the Jews. There are the Jews, and there's all history that's around us. I think that we're not the only people that have that perspective. I mean, we tend to view the world from a very narrow perspective. And I remember the Lubavitcher Rebbe claimed that the first Iraq war was fought for one reason only. And that reason was that Saddam Hussein would shoot missiles towards Israel, and miraculously, nobody was hurt. I think one person was injured or died, I forget. But the whole purpose of the war and of the hundreds, whatever the thousands, tens of thousands of people who died was for one reason only, for the miracle that no one died, or almost no one died in the land of Israel, even though they were under attack. So that's that type of narrow reading that emerges. Let me offer a different reading of Rashi, which is, if it's true that God gave it to them and then took it away from them, we have to ask ourselves, why did God take it away from them? Right? The Torah tells us why. The Torah tells us that later on in Genesis, it's not time for us to take the land because Avon HaEmori, the sin of the Amorites, hasn't reached the point of no return. Meaning, they lost the land because they were inadequate to live in the land. They violated, seemingly, the understanding, the human contract of being in this land. I guess it's still a special land. Therefore, they were evicted from the land. They lost their right to live there. And then we were given the right to live there. It suggests to me the possibility that if they lost the land because of their violations and because they failed to live up to the standards that are required, then maybe this whole portion in Rashi is intended to teach us a universal lesson. Just like they lost the land, we too could lose the land if we don't maintain the standards that are required of us. And we'll come back to that. I'm not going to give up on that comment. I think that's an equally plausible understanding of Rashi. So we have within this very famous Rashi that's seen as sort of fundamental another possibility for how to read and how to understand our relationship to the land. So I bring you some other texts here, and here's the phrase from Zechariah, Admat HaKodesh. That's the phrase of Holy Land. And now I'd like to move on to this text in Deuteronomy. because this, I think, will bring home the point that I was just making in Rashi. And the text reads as follows. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, figs and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat food without stint, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron, from whose hills you can mine copper. When you have eaten your fill, right? Here's the only bracha mentioned in the Torah. Give thanks to the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you, right? V'achalta v'savata. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God and fail to keep God's commandments, God's rules, and God's laws, which I enjoin upon you today, when you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered. Beware, lest your heart grow haughty, and you forget the Lord your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness with its seraph serpents and scorpions, a parched land with no water in it, who brought forth water for you from the flimsy rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers had never known, in order to test you by hardships, only to benefit you in the end. And you say to yourselves, after all of this that God did for you, because you're in the land and you're growing crops and you're satisfied and you own and you take possession of the land, then you say to yourself, with the sense of pride, my own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me. Remember that it is the Lord your God who gives you the power to get wealth, in fulfillment of the covenant that God made, on oath with your fathers, as is still the case. Now, I'm sorry, I apologize, because I didn't copy the next two verses, which I'm going to read to you now, which are critical. If I can find them here. We're in chapter 8, right? Here we are, chapter 8. All right, here we are. The next two verses. They continue. If you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods, serving and worshiping them, I solemnly warn you today that you will be altogether lost. Like the nations that the Lord will cause to die before you, so shall you be lost, because you would not listen to the voice of the Lord your God. So it seems to me that already here, although I have another text I want to bring to bear, already here the warning suggests you're going to lose it if you become haughty, if hubris overtakes you, as is the want of all national efforts over the course of time. Eventually they're corrupted and they lose their capacity to rule and to dominate, and that the domination is only ephemeral. You have landed in the land, right? And you've established yourselves, but you face the danger, as did Israel throughout history. The first temple was destroyed, the second temple was destroyed, and you were exiled because you don't have the eternal right. Yes, you might return to the land, but that right is itself is contingent. It's a contingent promise. It's contingent upon your fulfillment of God's will. If you adhere to the standard, then you can survive. If not, you're going to lose it. Now, the reason that I want to push this even further, and I also didn't provide you with a text, is that earlier in Deuteronomy, in chapter 2, there's a passage that describes, God is describing the history to Moses. Remember, Moses is telling the people, reviewing the history. And he talks about how we wandered and we entered the land. And he describes the various nations that we encounter. Moab, Ammon. We're not allowed to war with Moab and Ammon. Why can't we war with Moab and Ammon? Anybody? Moab and Ammon, who are they? Whose children are they? Moab and Ammon. Anybody?
Amalek?
No, they're not the children of Amalek, but they're the children of another relative.
Esav?
They're the children of Lot and his daughters. Remember, Moab means min av, from the father. All right. So they're relatives. Esav. So in the organizing of our journey and our entry into the land, so God provides us with a sense of order. How should we proceed? Understand, you're going to pass through Esau's territory, no warfare. You're going to pass through Ammon and Moab, no warfare, because they're relatives. Lo titgarbam. Don't fight with them. Don't start up with them. The first battle is with Sichon, the Amorite, right? And that battle is won. That's the sort of, I would say, it's the first effort at conquest. It's already in the Torah. It's not in it doesn't, in other words, the Torah doesn't wait for Joshua for the conquest to begin. So it seems. Now, in the course of describing these territories, the verses in Deuteronomy go out of their way. There are at least 10, no, I shouldn't say that, 5 or 6 verses describing all these peoples, ancient Near Eastern peoples, the Amim, the Chivim, the Chorim, who don't exist. And what it says is they lived in this place and they were conquered by this one. They lived and they were conquered. And the sense that you get is there must be some purpose to this description, because otherwise it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant information. That we didn't conquer and fight with Esav and Ammon and Moab, with those peoples, I understand. But why this secondary information in the context of our entry into the land? It's a warning. It's a warning. Nations come and go. Power, control is a political power, is something that passes. Here today, gone tomorrow. Don't count on the fact that God promised you the land, that to mean that you have some eternal connection with an absolute control over that territory. Because in the same way that they lost the land, so too you can lose the land. And it's not just a question, by the way, of power. It's a question about the nature of how you live in the land, because you have certain obligations to fulfill once you enter the land. So it's not a mere a promise without conditions. Okay, so I want to add that to this discussion, because I feel that too often the claim that we make is that the Bible grants us an absolute right to the land. And what that does is it contributes to a degree of our arrogance, in the sense that we believe that we can never lose it because we have this divine promise. Moreover, that this divine promise allows us to confront others and make a claim regarding the land in sort of in international politics and in our debates with other peoples, and use the Bible as the crutch on which we hang, or I think the mixed metaphor, what I mean to say, the basis on which we hang our relationship to the land of Israel. Okay. Any questions? Any questions about this? Difference of opinion as we move on. All right. Now, the next passage, where actually I don't want to read the Talmudic passage. I'll tell you what's going on in the Talmud. It's a classical passage. If you have time to study with your Chavruta, pages 110b and 111a in Ketubot, very important. Basic texts about the legal status of the land of Israel, because one of the rabbis, Rabbi Zera in Babylonia, is described as trying to sneak around his teacher, Rav Yehuda, and leave Babylonia in order to go to Eretz Israel. How could that be? Isn't it a mitzvah to go live in Eretz Israel? He's sneaking around his teacher. So what does his teacher say? His teacher says, there's a verse in the Bible that says we were sent to Babylon in exile, and we have to wait there until God calls us back. That's our fate. Our history is determined. You have no right to take history into your own hands and leave Babylon for Eretz Israel. And then a debate ensues in the Talmud between the two of them about different verses and how they're used. And eventually, Rav Yehuda calls the question by quoting Song of Songs, where it says, "Hishbati etchem benot Yerushalayim." I have what is it? Cause you to swear, the daughters of Jerusalem, and it says that 3 times. And the result of that is the Talmud suggests that God made us swear 3 oaths. There were 3 oaths that were taken. One oath was that we will not arise as a collective to the land of Israel. So, in other words, individual aliyah, yes. Massive aliyah, no. Number 2, that we won't rebel against the nations. And the third oath is that is one that the nations took, which is that they wouldn't oppress Israel too much. So, as you might know, the Rabbi of Satmar, based on the 3 oaths, actually the two of the 3 oaths, argues that because of that we're bound not to rebel. Zionism is a rebellion. We're bound not to act politically as a collective, not to arise to go to the land as a collective. Of course, who said that the 3 oaths are a halacha, are a law? It's a fraught conversation, a difficult conversation, and unclear in terms of the points that the Satmar Rebbe wants to make, but he is insistent. What's his problem? His problem is Deuteronomy. His problem is what his colleague, his older colleague, Sholem Ber Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the turn of the 20th century, or the 19th century, right, in the early the early 1900s. I'm sorry, the turn of the 20th century, right, wrote that the problem is nationalism. That nationalism will undermine religion, and they know that. They know that. The Torah knows it, right? That's the verse that says, "Kol chiva otzem yadi." You are going to grow fat, and then you're going to say, "It was my power. We did it." I don't want to fiddle around with the share screen, but in 1952, Ben-Gurion commissioned a special Haggadah, Haggadat HaAtzmaut, a Haggadah for Yom HaAtzmaut. And it was written by Mati Meged, an important Israeli writer, and written beautifully. Not a religious text, but a text to celebrate the creation of the state of Israel that could be used as a guide to the celebration of Israeli Independence Day. When Rabbi Goren, who was then the chief rabbi of the Israeli army, the Haggadah was printed in 10,000 copies. And when Rabbi Goren got wind of it, he made a beeline for Ben-Gurion's office, and he gave Ben-Gurion an ultimatum. It's either the Haggadah or me. Now, what upset Rabbi Goren? Right? The general tone of the Haggadah upset Rabbi Goren. Specifically, and this is what I would show you, I actually have 2 copies of this Haggadah that was destroyed. The 10,000 copies were destroyed, except I have 2 copies, and the copies are floating around. I mean, you can find them. You find them in auctions. I actually one of the copies I have has instructions about how the special ceremony should take place. It has a special readings special songs to accompany the Haggadah with, etc., etc. So the passage that to me is the most striking is the passage that you all are familiar with in the Haggadah, not by an angel, not by a seraph were we redeemed, but by God. In fact, it's one of the passages that allow us to understand that why Moses is not mentioned why isn't Moses mentioned in the Haggadah? Lo ede shaliach, not by a messenger. It's a polemic against Christianity in part, right? There no human messenger is the Redeemer. God is the only Redeemer. In Haggadat HaAtzmaut, in the Haggadah issued to celebrate Yom the Israeli Independence Day, it reads as follows: Lo yodei malach, v'lo yodei saraf, not by an angel, not by a seraph, v'lo yodei shaliach, ela al yedei tzva hagana l'Yisrael hikinu et ha'oyev v'yacholnu lo. Only through the Israeli army did we win this victory? And did we defeat our enemy? So Rabbi Goren understood that this is an exact replication and a fulfillment of the biblical verse, Kochi v'otzam yadi, right? This is what the text says. It's my power. We did it. And it's the haughtiness that leads to self-destruction. That's the question. When you become so arrogant that you lose a sense of a realistic sense of who you are. We'll see something more about this later on. Anyway, this is part of the discussion here in the Talmud about the significance of Eretz Yisrael and about the three O's and about the opposition, the fact that the Satmar Rebbe embraced the three O's, and my attempt to explain that the opposition to Zionism is not simply an opposition based on the fact that we have to wait till the Messiah. It's about the harmful effects of nationalism on the character of the people. Can we maintain our Jewishness and at the same time, and our values of Judaism, at the same time that we embrace nationalism, that we're tempted and seduced by power? And what the consequences of a power orientation are for a values commitment, and the tension between those approaches to life. So now what I wanted to show you was something that's unusual that we don't usually see. One of the commentaries on the Talmud, written by Menachem HaMeiri, Menachem of Perpignan. He was a 14th century rationalist, halachist thinker, a student, I would say, of Maimonides. Very important in terms of his broad commentary on the Talmud. So he writes, every place where wisdom and fear of sin are found has the status of the land of Israel. Thus the Rabbi said, anyone who lives in Babylonia lives, as it were, in the land of Israel. That's fascinating, because I thought the Holy Land, right? And we're obligated to go there. And Meiri says, no, any place where you can live a fulfilled religious life, according not only to the statutes, the way of life of a Jew, the moral commitments of a Jew, the spiritual surroundings, the ambiance. If the ambiance is conducive to morality and to learning and to holding on to the proper standards, then that place is like Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, according to the Meiri, seems to be a state of mind. The rabbis prohibited departure from the land because Israel does not ordinarily attain wisdom and fear outside of sin outside of it. Why? On account of the multitude of troubles and the yoke of exile that we suffer there. So in other words, it's problematic when we live elsewhere because we can't concentrate, we can't center our Judaism in an intense way. In Eretz Yisrael, we can live intensely and fully in ways in which we can't live outside the land. However, in the land of Israel, however, wisdom, right? If you can do so outside the land, it has the status of the land. Fascinating comment by Meiri. All right. In contrast to Meiri, however, and this is going, now we're getting to the center of our learning today. We're not going to read the Hebrew. You can do that on your own. Or you should actually try to read the Ramban. By the way, you know, when I was in yeshiva, so that was considered to be a challenge to sort of go through as much of Nachmanides' commentary on the Torah as we could. It's a commentary filled with interesting ideas. It's a commentary. It's a more reflective commentary, draws on a lot of midrashim, on mystical notions, on philosophic notions. A very rich commentary. Now, a little bit of background here. We're going to engage in the study of the text written by two Spanish personalities. One is Rambam Maimonides. Maimonides was born in the 12th century, right? And died at the beginning of the 13th century. Nachmanides lived a century later, died at the end of the 13th century. Nachmanides was born in Catalonia, was considered to be the most important rabbi in Christian Spain. Maimonides was born in where was he born? I'm forgetting now. Cordova, in Cordova. Maimonides had to flee Spain because of an invasion of Muslim extremists who invaded Spain because of the moderate Islamic government in Spain. In other words, they didn't invade Spain just to persecute Jews and Christians. They invaded Spain because they opposed the government, the Muslim leadership in Spain of the time. So Maimonides grew in an Islamic environment. Nachmanides, Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, grew in a Christian environment. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, Rambam, right, was influenced by Islamic philosophers, by the philosophic tradition. Nachmanides was one of the central figures in the emergence of Spanish mysticism. So we have two different personalities. Maimonides left Spain, fled from Spain, and went through North Africa, visited Eretz Israel in the post-Crusader years, and found it to be uncomfortable, not habitable in a constructive way, left Eretz Israel for Egypt, the land that we were prohibited from which we were prohibited in resettling. And he lived in Egypt. His creative life, much of his life was lived in Egypt as a physician to the Sultan and as a scholar. Nachmanides lived most of his life in Spain, but fled Spain as well and lived in Eretz Israel. He loved the land of Israel, as did Maimonides, but they have two different perspectives. Right? It's now not Nachmanides fled Spain, most probably because in 1260 he won the debate with Pablo Cristiani. That is, when you win a debate with a Dominican, you lose. And we have a record. We actually have a record of the debate. I think there's more than I know of the record that is preserved in Nachmanides' writings. There's an English translation, but I also think that there's a record preserved in the court records of the time. That it's not merely a Jewish record that we have, and it's clear that Nachmanides bested his opponent. And he had to flee from his beloved Eretz Israel. He left his family. His family remained, I think. His family remained in Spain. All right. Now I'm going to begin with Nachmanides, even though he lived a century after Maimonides, because he's so fascinating. And he introduces us to ideas that we don't usually encounter. So here we are. Now, he centers his discussion on some verses in Leviticus that promise that if we follow the ways of the people of the land, the Canaanites who lived in the land of Israel, the land will vomit us out. How's that for contingency, right? Do we need any more proof that our connection to the land is not absolute? It depends on our behavior, and we could lose it the same way everybody else loses it. And the land was defiled, therefore did I visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land vomited out her inhabitants. Scripture was very strict in forbidding these sexual. Okay, now the context for this are sexual violations, the incest laws in Leviticus. So I'm going to actually go down the paragraph and start from the middle here, because the question that Nachmanides is discussing is how come these incest laws have special valence in the land of Israel? If this is immorality, it's immoral. What's the special connection with the land of Israel? It should, it's immoral anywhere. So he's going to begin to unpack what is this special quality of this land and why violation in this land it has a unique dimension. So he starts as follows, or actually in the middle, I'm reading. The glorious name that is, God created everything, and God placed the power of the lower creatures and the higher beings, giving over each and every nation in their lands after their nation some known star or constellation, as is known by means of astrological speculation. Now, you don't really usually expect this in a rabbinic commentary, astrology. It is with reference to this that it is said, which the eternal your God hath allotted unto all the people, for he allotted to all nations constellations in the heavens, and higher above them are the angels of the Supreme One, whom he placed as lords over them, as it is written, but the prince of the king of Persia with da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, now what's going on here? Ramban is embracing an old myth, which then appears in Midrash, that every nation was created with how should we call them, a godly officer in heaven who is their conduit, who is their connection to the divine. That is, all nations operate under a different sign. You can call that sort of an expansion of the zodiacs to include all the nations of the world. The myth developed itself in such a way that it's reflected in the idea that different nations have different qualities. Rome has the quality of law. Greek has the quality of philosophy, Greece and aesthetics, right? Esau has the quality, I don't know, I mean, that's what's, in other words, the argument here is that every nation has an essence. It's not something that we're very comfortable with today, talking in these terms. But you can understand that this is a type of way of gaining rationalizing the fact that there are many nations. Because the question is, if God created the world, why did God create so much trouble? God should have created everybody as one. So one of the answers is, one is boring. If there are many nations introduce different qualities, different cultures. Right? This is the original multiculturalism. So every nation has its own guard, G-U-A-R-D, its own heavenly guard or mediator that represents it, that represents its quality. The only nation that doesn't have a mediator, right? So I'm sorry. So this is explicitly stated in Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 4:19. Where God says, you are not supposed to worship the stars and the sun and the moon, etc. I have given them, I have apportioned them to the nations of the world. So according to Nachmanides, idolatry is the way that God has given religion to the nations of the world. So idolatry is prohibited for us, but idolatry is the way of the religious life of the other nations. And because they are inferior, right? They need to worship God through a mediator. We are the only ones who have a direct line. And we worship God directly. There is no mediator. And our quality is a spiritual quality. All the other nations have some sort of material manifestation of their essence. They're silversmiths, they're whatever they are. They do something with the world. Functionally important, right? But not of essence, essentially significant as our role in the world. Our role is to represent God's essence in the world. Okay. I mean, look, the Ramban was a fan of the Jews, no doubt. And I understand that. Now, he continues, and here he says, now the glorious name is God. Now the glorious name is God of gods and Lord of lords over the whole world. But the land of Israel, which is in the middle of the inhabited earth, is the inheritance of the eternal designated to his name. He has placed none of the angels as chief, observer, or ruler over it, since he gave it as a heritage to God's people who declare the unity of God's name, the seed of God's beloved ones. It is with reference to this that God said, and it shall be mine own treasure from among all the people, for all the earth is mine. And it is further written, so shall you be my people, and I will be your God, and you will not be subject to other powers at all. All right? So the land of Israel is the axis mundi, right? It's the axis of the world. The whole world revolves around it. Remember I said that all of history revolves around it. This is its position. We are the center of the universe. Now, Mircea Eliade, in one of his works, defines what Holy Land is. What is a Holy Land? A Holy Land is a land that is the purpose of creation. That's the reading of Rashi that's done by the absolutists. The world was created for the sake of the land and to give us title to the land. Number two, Holy Land is Axis Mundi. It's the center of the universe. If I'm not mistaken, Yangtze means center. In other words, I may be wrong with this, but I know that there in the Far East there are some names that also mean center of the world. And this is a concept that nations sort of it's a construction of nations about their own significance in the world. The third quality that grants holiness to land is if blood is spilled in order to conquer the land. That invests the land with a degree of holiness in a perverse way. Okay, so the land of Israel is Axis Mundi. It's a center of the universe. We're not talking about any land here. We're talking about a land that essentially draws. What does it mean? It's the axis of the world. It means here is here is God. Here is the land of Israel, right? I'm sorry. Here is the people of Israel, and here is the land, or that's the link here. And the land transmits divine energy to the people who live in the land. The land is the mediator of God's presence to the people of Israel. Through the land, we sort of imbibe divinity. The land itself is invested with the divine because it draws directly. It's the axis that draws directly from the divine into the human. It's an essentialist. The land has ontological significance. By definition, it's holy because it's godly. Now, God also sanctified the people who dwell in this land with the sanctity of observing the laws against forbidden sexual relationships, right? Since we live in the land, then we are sanctified because the land itself grants us holiness and with the abundant commandments so that they would be dedicated to God's name. It is for this reason that God said, and you shall keep all my statutes and mine ordinances and do them, and said, I have said you shall not inherit the right. In other words, that's why we have to be morals. The land is going to vomit us out. So in other words, let me stop here. The answer to the question about morality is, of course, morality has to be preserved wherever you live. The special quality of the land of Israel is that if you don't observe the moral laws in the land of Israel, it's going to vomit you out. No other land will do that. That's the quality of the land of Israel. And since we are God's people, we live under this rule, under this judgment at all times. Are we adhering to the rules? Are we adhering to the moral standards? If not, the land will not tolerate us. It goes on. Let's say, "Who set you apart from all peoples." Thus the land which is the inheritance of the glorious name will vomit out all those who defile it and will not tolerate worshippers of idols, nor those who practice immorality. Okay, let's move on here.
Chaim, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So, do you think that the sort of unique ability of Eretz Yisrael to vomit us out for our failure to observe the mitzvot, to fail to live up to our moral responsibilities, is actually sort of implicitly advancing a special status of the land of Israel. That in saying that it has its ability to do such,
Yes.
it actually essentializes Israel.
Yeah. No, it's not. In other words, the land itself becomes an active force, and it's a mythological notion, because the land is given almost, it's given human qualities. It vomits you out, and it is. You're right about it. It essentializes it. This is a holy land. It cannot tolerate a life of unholiness. That's it, and it is, and living there is a privilege, and it requires that you adhere to the full range of of the commandments and of what's expected of you as a moral human being. Absolutely correct. Yes, Michael.
So should we understand that as fundamentally different from our expulsion from other lands that has historically happened? That was an expulsion done by people, not by the land, when we had to leave Spain, when we had to leave Germany, when we had to leave various places.
Yeah, I mean, now it's true that we also say "Mipnei chata'enu," but for all those other expulsions. But the fact is that that we were expelled because, in addition to our own flaws, the nations among whom we lived were not very kind. They were not well disposed to us, right? They persecuted us, right? That's very different from I mean, you can say maybe the land persecutes us. There is such a tradition, by the way, in Judaism, that the land itself, Eretz Ochelet Yoshvei, right? It's a land that eats up its inhabitants because the demands of living in the land are so severe that it's an intolerable place. And you think about it historically. I mean, there's certain degree to which this is true, because of what historically what happened is the land of Israel became the place of the convergence of all the major religions, and it generated this sense of the significance of the place, in ways in which that are beyond any other land in the world. As a result, yes, you want to continue? You have a further question?
So I'm wondering if I should or shouldn't be trying to connect this to what you were saying earlier about anywhere that we live a moral life, a deeply involved Jewish life is Eretz Yisrael. Does that mean that if I here north of Boston am living, it can come to the point where I am living a better Jewish life, and am I then at risk of being vomited out of this land because it is Eretz Yisrael in that sense?
No, so the Ramban. First of all, I don't know that the Ramban would agree with that. I mean, the Ramban really sees. He wouldn't agree with the Meiri at all, and I mean, he would reject the Meiri. Remember this: the Meiri is a rationalist. See, the Meiri, the rationalist is asking, what's going on here? A land has special quality. It's a land. I mean, simply a state has a special quality. It's a state. What are you talking about? So it's only the mythic mystic who attributes to land a degree of it has agent. The land has agency. That's right. That's something that's I mean, it's inanimate. It's inanimate. No, the land of Israel. It's inanimate, but it has agency, divine agency, not only agency. Right, as it has enormous power. We'll see in a moment. Okay. Now I'm sorry. I love this Ramban because it's so rich, and I can spend too much time, which we have. So now he goes on to say the following. I'll do it Baal Peh. All right, you'll read it. He quotes a midrash in the Sifrei, a halachic midrash, that's troubled by another problem, which is in the second paragraph of Shema. At the end of the paragraph, it says that you're going to be cast out of the land, exiled. Right? You'll be cast out of the good land, the good land. And then immediately afterwards, it says, "Uksharten wrote, tie your tefillin." So what the question is, why does the paragraph specifically relate the tying of tefillin, which is a personal obligation, to exile? Of course we have to wear tefillin. It's a daily commandment. So why specially mention in that context, when you're exiled, that you have to wear tefillin? From this, the Ramban, in the spirit of the Midrash, concludes, actually, that's not true. The only place that you really have to observe the entire Torah is in Eretz Yisrael. This is what's troubling, Michael, right? This is the heart of the Ramban. It's so essential that the Jewishness is dependent upon our living in the land. And the essence of Jewishness in terms of our fulfillment of Torah can only take place in the land itself. Everywhere else, says the Ramban, why does the Torah emphasize that you should put on tefillin in exile? Because you really should only have to put on tefillin in the land of Israel. However, since the Messiah may come and you may be out of practice, so you keep on putting on tefillin so you know how to do it. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. So the only reason, think about this, the inferior life of a Jew lived outside the land, because only in the land can you have true fulfillment. It blows your mind when you think about the thrust of the Ramban. Now, after having said that, he goes a little bit further. Right?
Chaim, it's Janet. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So
I wish I could see you. Where are you?
I'm so sorry. My camera's not working. There's something wrong with my computer, but you know my voice. So Chaim, in the contemporary application of this teaching, I'm thinking about the settlers that are acting in an immoral way by burning Palestinian towns. And shouldn't they be vomited out?
Yeah, the only thing is, listen, you see, when you're dealing with all of this stuff, people find ways of manipulating the tradition, and in a perverse way, they would say that what they're doing is fulfilling the Torah. Because the Torah says that you have to destroy all the idolaters among you, and you have to destroy Amalek. Now they would claim that the Palestinians are Amalekites, and they're fulfilling the mitzvah of destroying the Amalekites, not violating any moral precept. On the contrary, that they are maintaining the morality of the land, which has been contaminated and polluted by idolaters and violent people, the Amalekites. Right? So you need our violence has to be able to destroy their violence. I mean, and then you have a party where a lot of people are dying, unfortunately, right? But that's listen, zealotry leads to this type of perversity. Now, the Ramban, the one thing I have to say to honor the Ramban, he certainly was a moral personality, and will be horrified to imagine that people are trying to fulfill his notion by destroying and killing other people and destroying their property wantonly in this fashion. All right, that for sure. Nevertheless, the people who are doing so are in part driven by this text. Know that. We're going to see another Ramban in a moment. Okay. Now, let's read this line here. And he concludes the section about the commandments. Dwelling in the land of Israel is of equal importance to all the commandments of the Torah. Right? Now, I would say as follows, that according to the Ramban, living in the land of Israel is one of the principles of the Jewish faith. It's at least the 614th commandment, or maybe it's 613. The Ramban counts it, right? And it certainly is one of the principles of the Jewish faith. Now the Ramban gets to the conclusion. His coup de grace, he says, "Now I do not have permission to explain on the subject of haaretz." Whenever he says, "I do not have permission," you know what's coming. You know what's coming? A little nugget of Kabbalah, of mysticism. He violated the understanding in the 13th century that we don't publicize. Mysticism is studied in mystical circles and transmitted from one teacher to a student, but not yet publicized. Ramban he was, I think, the first one who began to utilize mystical notions that appear in other works in his commentary, which was a popular commentary. I have two editions of between the first publication of a Hebrew book in Rome in 1469 or something and 1546, about 10 editions of the Ramban were issued. Right? In less than 100 years. It was among that and Rashi, the most popular commentaries that people utilize. So the Ramban says, "Now I do not have permission to explain on the subject of haaretz, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz, more than this. What does haaretz in the first verse of the Torah mean? But if you will merit to understand the first haaretz, earth, mentioned in the verse in Breshit, and also the one mentioned in the section Va'aretz Tizkor in Bechokota in Leviticus, you will know a profound and sublime secret, and you will further understand what our rabbis have said. The sanctuary on high is exactly opposite the sanctuary below. I have already alluded to this on the verse, for all the earth is mine. All right, clear, right? Absolutely clear. Now, what's the Ramban saying? Aretz is a symbol. In mysticism, it's a symbol for the Shekhinah, for the divine presence. This is what we expected. The land itself is the habitation of the divine. It's not merely that you encounter the divine through the mitzvot. The essence of the land is itself divinity. It's a manifestation in physical form. It's a concretized aspect of God. A story. My friend and colleague, he was a Hillel director for many years, Michael Belinsky, went and had Purim's, his Purim meal at the home of Hanan Porat. Hanan Porat was one of the founders of Gush Emunim. He was one of the founders of the settlement movement. He was a member of Knesset. He was a student of Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. He was a teacher in a yeshiva, a Talmudic teacher and a very popular teacher and a wonderful human being. And an extremist. We met him once. We had a meeting with him once here, myself and a couple of, and got into a whole dispute with him. But Porat, Belinsky witnessed the following. In the middle of the Purim meal, Porat left, after a few drinks, left the table, went outside, came back into the table with some earth in his hand that he had dug up when he went outside. He took the earth, he put it to his mouth, and he said, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'adama. And he ate the earth. It's holy earth. Now we want to know why the settlers won't give up a piece of territory. It's God's body. It's the divine. We are bound by it. It's our essence. It's who we are. It's our identity. The Ramban says you can't fulfill your Judaism unless you live in the land. You can't be a Jew unless you live in the land. The Ramban is the religious version of Ben-Gurion, who said the only place to be a Jew is in the land of Israel. Now, there are dimensions. I have to admit to you, the land of Israel does facilitate a type of fulfillment and a total personality. I don't want to deny that, in ways in which a Jew cannot live as intensely anywhere else. And there are many examples, and I don't actually have time for this. But I want you to see what's at the heart of the conflict here and how essential this is. Now, this is a passage, just so that, unfortunately, I'll tell you what this says, and we're not going to be able to read it. This is another passage written by Nachmanides. It's a comment, it's a gloss that he writes on Maimonides' Book of the Commandments. And that's what's so fascinating, right? You see what it says, the heading is Nachmanides, Commandments Omitted by Maimonides. So Nachmanides wrote a separate text of glosses on Maimonides' list of commandments. And he differed with Maimonides in numerous places. And one of the places he differed was number 4 here that we have, where he says, Maimonides, you didn't count this essential commandment, the commandment of living and conquering the land. Wow. How could that be? It's an essential commandment. All the commandments are somehow dependent, contingent on this one commandment. You can't fulfill your commandments other than in the land of Israel, says Nachmanides. Yet Maimonides doesn't count it. What he's here, just let's read the first section here. He says, we are commanded to take possession of the land that God, blessed and exalted be God, gave our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and not leave it in the hands of other nations in desolation. This is what God said. And listen to the verse. V'horashtem et haaretz, and you shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell in it. So there are 2 commandments here. Dispossession is commandment number 1. What does it mean? Dispossession means conquest. In other words, it's not simply that you should live in the land. You have to conquer the land. That's what Eliyahu said. You have to spill blood over the land. The land is not simply something that you settle in. There needs to be an act that accompanies or that precedes that settlement, and that is warfare, violence, it seems. So it seems. I mean, there's an argument about whether the Ramban really means it, but the word in Hebrew, v'harashtem, literally means uproot. You have to uproot the people who live there. Right, and there are reasons you have to, they're idolaters, and you have to get them off the land, and then you shall dwell in it. For I have given you the land to possess it, and you shall divide the land for an inheritance. Okay, and then he goes on to talk about that it's the war that you fight. This is what the sages called obligatory war. In Hebrew, milchemet mitzvah. In colloquial terms, jihad. In other words, this is our jihad, according to Ramban's formulation and his understanding of milchemet mitzvah. I mean, you may say the Torah promotes this idea that conquest itself is a mitzvah, but the Rambam doesn't count conquest as a mitzvah. He doesn't count settling in the land, living in the land as a mitzvah. He does describe the positive aspects of living in the land. Of course, he decided not to settle in the land. This is all part of this positive precept, for we have been commanded to take possession of the land and dwell in it. If so, it is a positive precept for all generations, binding upon every individual, every one of you listening today. After we finish today, get your whatever and get there to the land. Not only live there, participate in the conquest of the land. That's what those settlers are doing, even during the period of the exile, as is clear from the many places in the Talmud. Now, Maimonides doesn't exactly agree with this formulation. Maimonides links the relationship to the land. How much time do we have? He links the relationship to the land to a very different understanding. The land itself provides us with a type of instrumental holiness, not essential holiness. The instrumental holiness is a function of the fact of what I described before, the psychological and social fact and halachic fact that we're in the land, we can fulfill more commandments, we live more intensely as a community. So it's conducive. The land is conducive it facilitates religious observance. For instance, today there's more Torah study in the land of Israel now than ever before in Jewish history. More men and certainly more women are learning Torah than ever before because of sort of the intense nature of the life and what living in your own national country, what that allows you. So now, what Rambam says is as follows, and it's a bit difficult. I'll read. Let me actually read this next passage. All right. Okay. Because all right. In contrast, the original obligation to keep the laws of the sabbatical year and tithes on the land stemmed from the fact that it was conquered by the Jewish people as a community. Therefore, when Joshua conquered the land, when the land was taken from the hands of by the Babylonians, their original conquest was nullified. So the Rambam is dealing with a discussion that occurs in the Talmud in a number of places, and it distinguishes between what's called Kedusha Rishonah and Kedusha Shniyah, the first sanctification of the land and the second sanctification of the land. The first sanctification was by Joshua, who conquered the land. The second sanctification was when Ezra returned from Babylonia with the people and settled the land peacefully and established sanctification through chazakah, peaceful possession, recognized by the authorities, by ruling authorities, right? Just like, by the way, Abraham. Remember Father Abraham? God promises him the land. His wife dies. What does he do? He goes to Ephron the Hittite. What doesn't he do? Which he should have done. I mean, he's a bad boy. He should have taken his Torah and said, Ephron, it says here it's mine. Give it to me. Instead, he bargains with him to buy the land. Not only does he buy it, he pays an exorbitant price. Why does he pay an exorbitant price? Because Ephron says to him, it's the patrimony. We don't give away the patrimony. We don't sell. In fact, we don't sell it. what I'm willing to do is, I'm willing to give you a burial plot, but we own it. Abraham says, no, 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 I must own it. I want it. Why does Abraham say I must own it? Because he has the promise. The promise doesn't mean that God will give it to you. It means you have to do all within your means, according to recognized mode of interaction and of trade, to acquire it. Because you're driven by the promise. You're not given by the promise, you're driven by the promise. That's the difference in attitude. And so that's what Ezra comes with the people. They settle the land. They have permission from the Persians to settle the land, and that's how they acquire title, not through conquest, not through conquest. That's why the Rambam doesn't hold conquest, because conquest is ephemeral. Here today, gone tomorrow. It's power. Power is not a factor in holiness. On the contrary, Hochiva Otzem Yadi is contra holiness. Chazaka, peaceful settlement, that grants holiness. And the Ramban, here we see it explicitly. I mean, I have other proofs, but I have to do this quickly. The Rambam says the entire land of Eretz Yisrael is more sanctified than all of the lands. How is its holiness expressed? The Omer offering, the 2 loaves, and the first fruit. How is the land holiness manifest? Mitzvot. In other words, it's all contingent. It's not the land that makes you holy. It's what you do in the land that makes you holy. Because the land is not essentially holy, it's only instrumentally holy. What is Zionism, my friends? According to the Ramban, Zionism is about the redemption of the land. And the land invests the people with a sense of meaning and purpose. According to Ramban, Zionism is about the redemption of the people. And the people invest the land with purpose. Right? Is Kedusha, holiness, shaped by observance, by standards, by morality, or is Kedusha something that's just by definition, right? An ontological, a mystical definition. Right? So the Rambam's project is a demythologization, a demystification, and a rationalizing of the significance of the land, because he's wary. He knows from experience, from historical experience, the consequences of attributing too much significance to the land, and how destructive that could be. Okay, let's get to some conclusion, and we'll be able maybe to take some questions. So you don't need me to tell you this, that Rabbi Kook is of the opinion that the land has essential holiness. Just read this 2 lines I'll read from Rabbi Kook's writings. Rabbi Kook was the first chief rabbi of Palestine, appointed by the British in the 20s. The land of Israel is not something external, not an external national asset, a means to the end of collective solidarity and the strengthening of the nation's existence, physical or even spiritual. The land of Israel is an essential unit bound by the bond of life to the people. I mean, he says that. Then look at the last line here. It says, the expectation of salvation is the force that preserves exilic Judaism, and the Judaism of the land of Israel is salvation itself. The land, I mean, it can't be any more explicit. And you understand that the power of these words drive people to fulfill their ideals in a way that can be very, very damaging and destructive. Now, again, this is the writing of a contemporary of Rabbi Kook, Rabbi Meir Simcha, who lived in Lithuania, and he argued against the notion. I'm sorry, it's very small print. He argued against the notion that anything has essential holiness. What's holy? What's holy? God. When Moses came down with the tablets, Rabbi Meir Simcha says, why did Moses break the tablets? Why did he break the tablets? What right did he have to break the tablets? He saw the people worshiping the golden calf, and he knew right away, I have to break the tablets. Because if I give them the tablets, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? They're going to worship the tablets. They're going to make an idol out of the tablets. That's brilliant. In other words, the tendency of people, the natural tendency is to sanctify the things that are of significance, to attribute to them essential meaning. So we do that with we do that with things that we're devoted to. We do that as we become dependent upon all sorts of trinkets that are around us. And we do it to something of great significance, like the land itself. Nationalism becomes something holy in the minds of the people who are pursuing meaning for the people of Israel. And Rameir Simcha understands the danger of attributing ultimacy to anything. So any religious object, a religious object is a facilitator of holiness. It's not holiness itself. Its holiness is derivative, not essential. Understand that, right? It's not ultimate. The only thing that's ultimate is the divine. All right. So let's just see. I'm sorry that we can't read Steiner. I'll just tell you one chidush of Steiner, and then we'll come to a conclusion. George Steiner was a literary critic, lived in England, was not a Zionist. And one of the great, so two things about Steiner. The title of his essay is Our Homeland, the Text, or Our Text, the Homeland, Our Homeland, the Text. So Steiner's claim is that we survived as Jews because we didn't depend upon a temple, we didn't depend on sovereignty. Right? The Rambam says holiness is not dependent on sovereignty. The Ramban says we have to conquer the land, so we need sovereignty in order to attain holiness. I mean, it's two very different worldviews in that regard. So Steiner says, if you look at Jewish history, you understand that the unique dimension of Judaism, the reason we survived was because we were not dependent on a place. We were not dependent on our ruling in a place. We were not dependent on a temple. We were able to survive the destruction of the temple like no other people of antiquity who survived without their temple and without sovereignty, without their national identity intact. And that was because we had a book. The book was portable, and wherever we traveled, we focused on. And Steiner has another brilliant point, which is that actually the world would be better off if everybody understood a fundamental fact of human existence, that we're all strangers in this world. We all came from somewhere else. And that no one, I would say, according to Steiner, there's no such thing as indigeneity. You know, what's this business? I own this land because I was here. Well, nonsense. You happen to live there. You may even rule over the land. But it doesn't mean that the land is you. But the land is the land is how we live on the land. The land is not the grantor of significance. We have to live an exemplary life in order for the land to have meaning. Otherwise, it's destructive. So that there's a tension here between these understandings. But I think that, Steiner's notion is something that it is liberating to humanity. It would help us significantly if people had a more reasonable attitude that counter the nationalism that's so rampant. All right, so finally, just two last quotes. Here you'll see here, this is the Manifesto of the Land of Israel movement in August 1967. And when you think about the Land of Israel, you should know that the signatories here are not all religious zealots. Plenty of secular leftist, so-called leftist Israelis, kibbutznikim. When the land was conquered, they saw it as an opportunity for further settlement. In other words, they didn't live in the foundation. They didn't live in the early 20th century, so they weren't able to participate in the founding of the state of Israel. Well, now after 1967, we can refound the state of Israel with new conquered territory. What a new opportunity! All right, the last two quotes here. Geula Bat Yehuda. She wrote an article called Ramban's Doctrine of the Land of Israel and the Philosophy of Rebirth. Now that we are walking in the powerful light of Ramban, what does she mean? After 1967, she's writing this, after 1967, fulfilling the commandments of settlement and conquest. Well, if we've conquered the territory, both positive commandments, it is appropriate that we not abandon essential negative principles of Torah and not leave even one iota of the land that we have sanctified anew with blood sanctified anew with blood, Eliada, in the hands of the other. All right, so Geula Bat Yehuda, she's the daughter of, if you remember when Ben-Gurion reads the Declaration of Independence, a rabbi gets up and says Shehechianu after the Declaration of Independence. That's Geula's father, right? That's her father, who's reading the blessing, and she writes this. She is a sympathizer, not only a supporter of the settler movement, and sees the settlers as fulfilling Nachmanides' vision. This is very much in line with Rabbi Cook's. Rabbi Cook, I have a poster in my collection. I was going to show it to you, where Rabbi Cook says there are no Arab lands. It's true, they lived here. But these are not Arab lands. There's only one identity, this land. This is Jewish land. It was given to us, and it was sanctified for us. So it's not that we can't give it away. There's no question. In other words, it can't even be a question about giving it away. Because it's not for you to decide who gets it. God already decided. And we're there, and it's ours. On the other hand, David Hartman writes, the fact that the Torah was given to Moshe in the Sinai desert, that is, outside the historical boundaries of Eretz Israel, teaches that the challenge, you shall be holy, takes precedence over the notion of the sanctity of the land. The land was granted as an instrument for the sake of the realization of the sanctity of the people. The reversal of priorities by virtue of the absolute devotion to the value of the land without consideration for the realization of the quality of life within the land constitutes idolatry and the undermining of the covenantal destiny of Israel. Right? So what Hartman says is the Ramban, ironically, the Ramban who says that the land vomits you out if you're an idolater, he is responsible for converting the land into an idol itself. Fetishization of the land and the idolatrization of the land. Now, Rabbi Soloveitchik said the following. I know you have a quote here, but I'm going to read you another quote from Soloveitchik. Ani yodea mashahu al tushat Eretz Israel. He said, I know something about the holiness of the land of Israel. Aval ani makir od kedusha. But I recognize another holiness, kedushat ha'adam, the sanctity of human life. And when the moment comes where I have to make a decision, right, then the determining factor will be the sanctity of human life. So as a result, Rabbi Soloveitchik in September 1967, in a public shiur, was asked by someone about the holiness of the land. By the way, this shiur was transcribed. It was translated from Yiddish into Hebrew and into English, and the section in which he answered this question is omitted. These are the tapes that were not translated and only discovered years later. I mean, people who were there knew about it. And he said something very simple. He said, I have the text. I'm sorry, we're almost done with our time. He said the following: I'm a rabbi. Don't ask the rabbi questions about territory. Those are political, military questions. They are questions to be decided by the Knesset and by the chief of staff and the military advisors. You can ask the rabbi for halachic decisions regarding matters that the rabbi is familiar with. But this is not an area of my expertise. And rabbis have no reason or right to get themselves involved in rendering a decision about the future of territory. If the military will decide that for the sake of preserving life and for the sake of peace, we can trade land for peace, then that's the obligation and we have to follow that decision. Now, we've lost that religious idea. And unfortunately, what's dominant today, as we heard before, is the notion that religion is absolute, that religion affirms Nachmanides' notion that the land is essential, that you can't be fulfilled as a Jew without living in the land, and the other inhabitants of the land are a foreign polluting element that need to be expelled. Ad kedei kach. It seems to be some of the thinking that we face today. Whereas there is a perfectly rational understanding that land only facilitates meaning. It doesn't grant the meaning. That land is only an instrument and not an essence. And that we like other nations look for the opportunity to develop a richness in our culture and our heritage by dwelling in our own land and having the opportunity to fulfill the test, right? This is Zionism. The test is, does Judaism work? Does it only work in exile when we don't have the temptation of power, or can Judaism be activated in all of its moral dimensions and as a restraining force when we do have power, so that we can live successfully as a nation in our land? Okay, I used up all the time, but most people have gone, but maybe there's some people with questions who want to ask. I'll stay another couple minutes if we have some questions. I know that I must have said things that bother you. If not, we'll have a drink tonight. Yes, Michael.
I believe I remember you teaching at the Teaching for Peace at UCLA in November that we
Yes.
have a positive obligation to reject our own holy texts when we can't find peaceful interpretations of them.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you have a marked up version of this set of source materials with which ones you reject.
Well, I'll tell you something. In truth, there are times where I've presented the Ramban in such a way, with such passion, that people didn't know that I actually had rejected the Ramban until I said that later on. So that tells me something. The Ramban's text is a rich text. I don't want to lose it, even though, I think I have to live with it, even though it's used and it's been utilized by the extremists. Because there is a fundamental argument between the rationalists and the mystics. The mystics say we're Jewish and that the rationalists are Greek, right? And now the rationalist would say this is what I think Maimonides would say. Maimonides would say the following: you know what? This is my words. I'm willing to have an argument with you about religion, even though I think you're wrong, about meaningful religious life and the spiritual life. But I want to tell you one thing. You, mystics, stay away from politics, because politics and mysticism is explosive and it's evil in the way it manifests. And the only legitimate approach in politics is a rational approach, because the mystical approach distorts and corrupts in its attribution of essence to things that are only means and not ends. But it allows us to say the ends justify the means. Right? Very, very, very an immoral way of thinking. So it's the Ramban has a quality, the mystical quality. We shouldn't lose it. These ideas, they're fanciful and interesting. On the other hand, when they're taken in the literal way that they are, I think that they have to be studied maybe with a warning label. Maybe that's what has to happen. A warning label here. Be careful about the political application of these ideas. Okay. Thank you. I think it's a good question, actually. It's a good question. Look, one of the points that we made in that discussion, an initial discussion with Christer Stendhal, was that there's no whiteout in Scripture. So that's a problem. We live with the texts and we can't erase them. And therefore, we're obligated to demonstrate the qualities of those texts and what they yield. And the other thing that I think is important for us to recognize as Jews, that texts speak to us. They're not just theoretical. Even though it's, people's dispositions are also a factor in how they clearly in how they act, right? Nevertheless, the fact that something is rooted in a text and we are so dependent that it's our tradition gives it a degree of significance and authority that shouldn't be lost shouldn't be lost on us. That's why I say that these texts are explosives, and Rambam. I mean, you read the Rambam's so technical and halachic and so on, and you say, are they talking about the same idea? The context for Nachmanides' comments, long comment, are the laws of purity in the Bible. So already some mythic background. Rambam's context is halachic. That's where he talks about the holiness of the land. He anchors it not in the land, but in the law. Right? And you could argue he's the Jew, and Nachmanides is being influenced by external notions, mythological notions. Right? Fascinating. Okay, to be continued next week. We'll talk about Jerusalem. All right.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Chaim.
much.
All right. Well, let me unshare, stop the share, and maybe see a few people. Take care. Thank you for holding on, all of you who've stayed on.